So today we're going to focus on reflex arcs and reflexes. So reflexes are a very rapid or fast response. It's going to be predictable. So every time it's going to be the same, and it's going to be involuntary in the sense that you cannot control it. Okay, so just to kind of give you a heads up before we get too far into this video, I cannot write on this screen right now. So to be able to have this video available for you. So I'm going to say things over and over and over again, and I'm going to kind of move this little red dot around to kind of emphasize things, but just be aware of that. When you hear me say something for like the 10th time, make sure you wrote it down. So reflexes, again, are going to be very rapid, so very quick. They're going to be the exact same every time. They're involuntary, and they're going to respond to a stimulus. Remember, a stimulus is just anything that can cause change. So most of the times reflexes are done to protect us. So they're in response to temperature, they're in response to pain, they're in response to overstretching something. But those responses, again, are going to be very quick, predictable, and you're not able to control them. So the reflex arc is basically the pathway that the reflex is going to follow from the sensory neuron through the integration center back to the effector. So the reflex arc has 5 parts, and we're going to look at all 5 parts right now. Okay, so the first part of the reflex arc is the receptor. So in this particular example, the receptor is a pain receptor here in the skin because you're getting stabbed with a nail. Okay, so the first part is the receptor. The receptor is going to receive the stimulus. So in this case, the receptor is receiving the stimulus, which is the nail causing pain. So the receptor will receive the stimulus. And then part 2 is going to be our sensory neuron. Remember, sensory neurons are afferent, right? And so they carry information from the receptor to the integration center. So the receptor received the information, it passed it along the afferent neuron, and then the information ended up in part 3 of our reflex arc. The third part of our reflex arc is the integration center. The integration center is usually the brain or spinal cord. In this particular instance, it's the spinal cord using just an interneuron. Remember, interneurons or association neurons, they're the same thing. So interneurons or association neurons, those are those neurons that communicate directly between a sensory and a motor neuron. And so when a reflex is processed in the spinal cord using just inter or association neurons, it happens even faster than if it had to go all the way up to the brain. So in this instance, this reflex is going to happen very quickly because you're protecting yourself and the information is getting processed right here in the spinal cord. So the fourth part of our reflex arc is our motor neuron. And so the motor neuron is going to be the efferent neuron, taking the information from the integration center out to the effector. And the effector is going to be our 5th and last part of our reflex arc. Remember, effectors are usually glands in muscles. And in this particular case, it's a skeletal muscle. And for most of our reflexes, it's going to be a muscle. Because again, as a general rule, reflexes are trying to protect you. So it's usually going to be some kind of muscle that's going to cause the response. In this case, you've been stabbed by the nail. The information is sent to this integration center, and your reflex is to pull back away from that painful stimulus. So those are the 5 parts of our reflex arc: the receptor, the sensory or afferent neuron, the integration center, which could be made of association or interneurons, the motor neuron or efferent neuron, and then the effector that's actually carrying out the response. So looking again here at, this is a different reflex arc. So in this particular reflex arc, I have the stimulus, which is the hammer hitting the quadricep tendon muscle. We are going to do a lab that should incorporate some of this. So the stimulus is the hammer hits the tendon. And what will happen is that tendon will bend in like this because you hit it. It was nice and straight here, and then you hit it, so the pressure will cause it to come in. What that does is cause a really quick stretch in the muscle because it's all attached, and it causes a quick stretch in the muscle. So there's my stimulus. My stimulus is I stretch this quadriceps tendon. So my receptor here in the muscle notices that quick overstretch, sends that information along the afferent or sensory neuron to the spinal cord, which is my integration center. My spinal cord processes that information real quick, sends the response out along the efferent motor neuron, and then the quadriceps muscle will act as my effector. It will contract and help pull that tendon and shorten that muscle up so it doesn't tear it. That's what causes that kick out reflex, is you've stretched the quadricep tendon very quickly and faster than normal. And so your muscle contracts to shorten and pull it back up and try to protect it. This example over here on the right is the same one we just saw. Okay, here's my stimulus of the sharp nail. So I have receptors in the skin receiving that information. Afferent sensory neurons taking that information back to the spinal cord or integration center. It's getting processed through an association neuron. The information then travels out the effector neuron, or the efferent neuron, out to the effector. So it will pull the hand, or it will cause the response, pull the hand away from the painful stimulus. So both examples of a reflex arc both have all 5 parts. And lastly, we have 2 major types of reflexes. We have autonomic reflexes and somatic reflexes. So somatic reflexes, these are reflexes that involve skeletal muscle. Remember when we broke our nervous system down, somatic nerves went and controlled skeletal muscle. So somatic reflexes control skeletal muscle. Somatic reflexes, so this is not written on there anywhere. Okay, somatic reflexes are usually processed in the spinal cord, so they'll happen even faster. So these are the reflexes that are happening for protection, and they're being processed in the spinal cord, so they happen faster. Autonomic reflexes, these are not going to involve skeletal muscle. Autonomic reflexes are going to involve cardiac and smooth muscle. So officially that's not written anywhere, like you could figure it out from these examples, but autonomic reflexes involve cardiac and smooth muscle. Again, they're going to be automatic. And so some examples of things like that would be smooth muscle regulation, so controlling as food moves through the digestive system. Heart and blood pressure regulation, so the quick changes we make in response with our heart rate and our blood pressure. Regulation of glands, for example, sweating. That would be an example of a reflex, a response to the stimulus. Digestive system regulation, so elimination of solid waste, moving food through the digestive system, releasing enzymes. Okay, all of those would be an example of autonomic reflexes. So when we come in on Thursday, we're going to start right away with our reflex lab and doing some processing and work with reflexes. And this will be between this video and the previous video. That is all of the notes that you need for your nervous system quiz.